Hey, what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where we're bringing it back to our X-Men series rewatch with X-Men The Last Stand in preparation for the movie I haven't seen yet, Dark Phoenix. So obviously a lot of people hate this movie, right? X-Men The Last Stand. It's one of the worst X-Men movies out there. There has been a lot of X-Men movies, and this is probably in a lot of people's bottom 3. But that's not really something I've ever really understood, right? Because I've always loved this movie. I've always been entertained by it. I've watched it so many times. I've read and possibly even owned the novelization for the movie. I've been a fan, right? But keep in mind that I haven't seen this movie in probably 6 years when I reviewed it last. In 6 years, my tastes have changed. My scoring method has changed. So the possibility of my score being different than it used to be was definitely on a range of possibilities that could have happened. And yes, my score did change. It has gone down. I can tell you my original score, which was 93%, which actually meant my original scores had The Last Stand as the best movie in the original trilogy. Believe it or not, I liked it that much. My score has gone down. I will not tell you how much it has gone down, so you'll have to wait until the end of the review when I reveal that. Just know that it has gone down, and it has gone down for a reason. So let's get into it. So I want to start off with the negatives, given the fact that everybody hates this movie, everybody wants to give it crap, so they want to have their own opinions on everything. So I scoured the internet. I wanted to find as many possible things that people have to say about this movie. And people have a lot of opinions on the movie. But what I wanted to do is to take all those complaints and kind of split them down the middle and find out what was opinion and bias and what was actual technical and cinematic. One of the main complaints about this movie in general was how it doesn't relate to the source material, the comics, how it doesn't stay true to the comics, how it betrays the vision of the comics, and so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. I can't really speak to that because I never actually read the comic books. What I can say is that with any given movie, any kind of adaptation based off of a book, a play, another movie, whatever. I don't really care about the source material. All I want is for the movie at hand to make sense, to have characters that you care about, to have good enough pacing. You know, I couldn't care less if they changed James Bond to a girl, or if Wolverine was black, or something like that. I just don't care about things like that. Even when you look at X-Men 1 and 2, they strayed from the comics all the time, but people didn't really care that much about it. They cared more about it right here because of their opinions on it. So when you're looking at source material in general, I'll just say I don't really believe any of that. But then you start to get more specific, right? Because it branches out into other things. One of the main problems people had with this movie was some of the major deaths that occurred in the film. They were complaining because the first and second movie took so much time introducing you to these characters, and they just kind of throw them in the garbage like they were nothing to begin with. I'll point you in the direction of another show that kind of does something similar. Game of Thrones. So many major players in that show die off like nothing, like they're garbage, like they're just yesterday's meat. Yet everybody loves that. It is in there for shock value, but it's also kind of in there to change the atmosphere of the film to something much more darker, to something much more unknown and unpredictable. A lot of people don't like it, but I actually love it. I love what they did with this movie, and I love the fact that nobody was ever safe. So that is another argument that I would say no to. The next argument would say that Dark Phoenix was just not dark enough. She was not as destructive as she would be in the comics. Once again, I have not read the comics. I don't know how destructive she was in the comics. However, what I can say is she was pretty dang destructive in this. She was pretty dang scary every time she was at the forefront doing something. She is destructive. She is completely unhinged. She is unpredictable, and she is unstable, and everything that she does is insanity. I love every second that Jean Grey / Dark Phoenix is in this movie doing something. It's amazing. However, what I will argue against instead is that there's not enough screen time of her, because she's completely watered thin, because there's so many other storylines happening in this film. And that's what my main complaint of the film is. Too much stories. Now, because the other movies focused a lot on civil rights and things like that, they had to include something like that along the lines in this movie, and that's why they had the mutant cure. And then they had the Dark Phoenix storyline, obviously, but then they had other things like a love triangle between Bobby, Kitty Pryde, and Rogue. They had this story with Angel and his father, and that storyline seemed like it was thrown in for no reason at all. He doesn't seem to fit fit for any reason. I like the character just fine. I just don't understand his relevance to the story. And then there's even more storyline with the Secretary of Human Mutant Relations, that's Beast. There's just so many things going on at once that it's kind of hard to juggle as you're watching and figure out which one's the main storyline. Obviously it's the Cure, but why should it be? Why isn't it focusing so much more on Dark Phoenix? Is it because it didn't have enough of a big budget to showcase a lot of crazy stuff? Is that why? I mean, I understand. Point of the matter is there is way too many stories going on in this movie, which is unfortunate because I love the Dark Phoenix side. There's a lot of personal stakes going into the Jean Grey side of the story than there is the Cure side. A lot of people say that it is very important to fight against the Cure, but you don't really feel that as much as you do with the Jean Grey side. So those were some of the bad things you could see in this movie, but I also like a lot of the good stuff to be found, like visuals. There's a lot of crazy things going on in this movie visually that are just impressive, and they just kind of blow you away. I also really liked Ellen Page's role in this film, which seemed to be much more in the foreground than it's ever been before, so that's really good. In general, I would say it's the atmosphere in this film that really gets you on your toes, gets you out the edge of your seat, because it really is fascinating. It really is something that can get your blood pumping if you forget about things like source material. It's just a movie that never really lets up. I will give you this, it's not as meaningful as the first and second movie. It doesn't have as much of story depth as it thinks it does because of all these different storylines happening all at once. So while the bones of something meaningful might be there, you don't really catch on to it because there's just too much happening. But at the end of the day, I don't really have any problem with it. I still think it's a really good movie. My original score was 93%. Like I said, it has gone down. It has gone down to 87%. 87 out of 100 possible stars, which ranks it as number 2 in the original trilogy. So I'm really curious as to what you have to say about X-Men The Last Stand, since everybody else seems to really hate it, so make sure you tell me in the comments down below. As for YouTube, you know what you can do. You can hit subscribe, you can like it, and you can hit the little bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then,